Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And one of the things we've talked about on this show, I've been honored to cover from a different angle on a few different occasions, actually, is accessibility and disability. It's something that, a lot of us are. I don't know how to say exactly, but we get so focused on ourselves, right? If it's not affecting us or a family member, we don't really care that much. I mean, that's just the truth. Whether we're opening a business, whether it's a nonprofit event, or whether it's just our own lives. And I've seen some people make great strides in having accessibility and helping for disability advocacy. Traveling around the world, I've gotten to see people who are fighting for those rights. And we've seen historically people having to fight really hard for those rights. And one thing that I noticed really interesting about Japan over here is they have pretty much, not everywhere you go, but in the major cities, every sidewalk has a special lane just for blind individuals to be able to navigate. It just blew my mind to see that because we don't have that in the US traditionally in most places. And I saw that and I thought to myself, wow, they had to design every sidewalk just for this. And the percentage of blind people to people who can see is a very small percentage, but it really spoke to me about taking care of each other, about our role as people in society. So this conversation today, we're going to get into that for a whole bunch of accessibility and disability. So Mark Barlet, so great to have you here and to highlight what you're doing to help those individuals. And so to start off, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Barlet. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of AccessForge, but I've been in the disability advocacy space for 25 years. I am a person with disabilities, so a lot of this is personal to me. Um, Talking about accessibility and talking about the importance of accessibility.
100%. And this is especially the case for the veteran community, which, I've spent a lot of time working with, and I've been honored to work with some entrepreneurs in the veteran space who are fighting for this because a lot of them are dealing with a higher disability rate. And, people always say, well, you get compensated by the VA. Uh, the VA compensation doesn't make every place accessible depending on your type of disability, right? It's a
Well,
little
my
extra
my
money.
disability my disability is also related to my service. I am a service disabled Air Force veteran. And no, the compensation is really just there to compensate you for what broke while you were in service. It doesn't
Right.
actually fix much.
Right, exactly. And so let's get back into that story. Of course, the common questions you always hear, I'm sure you've heard it 100 times. Why did you join? And when did you join? What was kind of the path that led you to that?
Why I joined the military? The truth is, my father was a former Marine. My grandfather was Army Air Corps turned Air Force. I joined because I wanted to go to college. Let's be honest with you. It was a path towards higher education for me, and it didn't go as planned. I planned on doing my 4 years and moving on, and didn't even make it four before I was discharged due to the nature of the disability that I acquired while I was active duty.
And because of that discharge, did it affect your time in service so that you could not use the education benefits or?
No, I absolutely use the education
Oh, okay.
benefits. I
Good.
use the education benefits for it, but there was a point in my military career where I was not on the fence about doing forward and going, but potentially re-upping. I enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed my MOS, and there was this crossroads where do I put more time into this or do I move into civilian sector? And then that decision was made for me.
Right. And now, were you actively combat deployed or was it just a day-to-day
No,
thing that
I
happened?
it was it's the saddest military disability story in the world. And it was, so I was a med tech. I worked at the hospital and was working a night shift. And was at the old Malcolm Grow Medical Center at Andrews Air Force Base outside of
Mm,
Washington, D.C.
right.
And I'm sure we've all seen those really worn out stairs that have the big divots in the stairs because everyone's climbed up and down them for 50 years. I happened to be working the night shift, tripped and fell, went over the railing of the stairs and broke my
Oof.
back at the bottom of the stairs.
How
I
many
was
floors was
found
it?
just one,
Just
but
one
it
floor?
was one granite stairs
Mm.
on a granite floor, and was found about 45 minutes later by another night tech and was rushed to the ER and then flown to Bethesda Naval Hospital, where I underwent surgeries and things like that.
And were you conscious for that 45 minutes? You just couldn't, were
Nope,
you, you, oh, you were,
I woke up on a helicopter.
wow. I couldn't imagine that. That's definitely a shock to wake up on a helicopter. And did you end up semi-paralyzed or they were able
So
to
I'm
do what they could?
so I'm technically an incomplete paraplegic is what the medical term is called,
Mm.
but due to the fantastic doctors at Bethesda Naval, along with the VA and some of the amazing work the VA did after I got out of the military, I'm able to walk and I enjoy a pretty normal life, other than pain and pain management. So I'm quite blessed, to be honest.
I think they should change it to partial. Incomplete makes it sound like it's a bad
Well,
thing. Like you should have been a full, they
that's
should change
just
that
what it
term to
means is
partial. Yeah.
it's it incompletely severed the spine, not completely
Uh,
severed the spine. So, but
but it's a
um,
good thing in the long
it's a
run.
good thing. Exactly, it's a good thing.
It just doesn't sound good. They should change that. But yeah, so how did that kind of fuel you wanting to help with accessibility? Because of your pain, was it just harder to access certain buildings, or you just thought about what if I had been fully paraplegic, then what then?
No, it was none of those things. Interestingly enough, my
Mm,
disability advocacy did not actually kick in until my best friend, this woman I'd known since the sixth grade, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And she and I used video games to stay connected while we were on our adult life and our adult journey. And then one evening we were going to play, and I think I'm probably older than you are, Mr. Whiskey. So I'm going to date myself pretty bad, but we were supposed to be playing EverQuest, and she didn't log on. And so I picked up the phone and I gave her a call, and her husband answered the phone, and I could hear my best friend Stephanie crying in the background. And it was because
mm.
that afternoon, multiple sclerosis decided that her mouse hand, the hand she uses to control her mouse, wasn't going to work anymore. And I
Wow.
knew how much she loved video games and how video games were her connection to the world around them. And that really led me on the journey. And that journey was to found the nonprofit organization AbleGamers and spend 20 years advocating for people with disabilities in the video game space and making sure that companies made games that welcomed people with disabilities, because I understand the importance that games brought to social isolation and the mental well-being of people with disabilities who are much more likely to be socially isolated than their able-bodied peers.
For sure. I'm not the biggest gamer because my parents said nothing with violence, guns, or swords or curse words growing up, and so that was every video game basically. And I played
Pretty much.
mainly Lego video games with my younger sisters, but later on in life I got into Call of Duty and stuff like that for a little bit right before I went into the military. It was not the same. But I always thought to myself, I said, what happened if I lost some fingers or one of my hands? How would I play? Would I play with one hand? Like I thought about it because I was like, I still want to play. So how do we go about doing this? So One thing that I'm interested for in particular about this conversation is the positive side of video gaming. I've had a lot of episodes on video game addiction, on mental health issues, and there is a huge issue with that. But I love that we're going to focus on the positive side too, which is the community of it, because there is a community. And like I say, with podcasting, with all the social media groups, it allows for you to have intercultural exchange, global connection, and to really meet people in your niche. I mean, we have found there's a group for pretty much everything now. And so I think
Yep.
it's really important to highlight that, especially for people with disabilities. As I mentioned, I'm here in Japan, and actually, one thing I saw they did went to, it's called the Darn Avatar Cafe. And at this Darn Avatar Cafe, they have only robots there. But the robots are being controlled by people with disabilities who would be otherwise unemployable. And so, like, our waitress, she was essentially, if we were in Georgia, she was in New York City controlling it. I guess I don't know if she was in a wheelchair, what the disability was, but she couldn't really leave the house. But it allowed her to, make money and to socialize with customers because the robot has a camera, so she could see us. We couldn't see her, but she could see us and talk to us through the machine. So I think there are so many creative ways now, and I think video gaming is one of those ways that really connects people. So, what got you into the gamer space? Was that something, obviously, you mentioned
Well,
growing up as an
I was
80s
a
kid and
lifelong
everything?
gamer. I was a lifelong gamer. I started my gameplay back in the Atari 2600 days. So I'm real old. And, you know, I was an only child, and so gaming was something I would do with my neighbors and the kids like that. And, so, you know, gaming has always been a part of my life. And unlike your parents, my parents didn't care if I played with violent things. So, as I moved into adulthood, I continued to game, but the internet came along and gaming got this really amazing social aspect that we didn't have back, when you're playing, Mario Brothers or something like that. There'll be one or two players, and that other player had to be in the room with you. Now, all of a sudden, as you pointed out, we could, jump into the world of EverQuest or any of them, any modern game and be playing with someone who's sitting on their couch in Seoul or South Texas. And we have a shared experience, we have a shared mission, a shared goal, and we can accomplish that. And I don't know about you, but I've made some real life friends that I've known for over 20 years that I met in gaming. And, as you talked about the waitress and the robot, that for so many people, especially people with profound disabilities, getting out of their house to do something as simple as, going to the grocery store would require, access vans and nursing care and things like that. And so for so many profoundly disabled people, leaving their house is a 2 or 3 times a year endeavor. And so video games and the social aspects of video games allows them to have friends and to be checked in on and see what's going on and really stay connected with the world around them.
Right, 100%. I've seen a lot of videos, whether it's friendships or romantic, where people are meeting their online gaming partner in person for the first time, or those sometimes people do like an annual trip where they all meet up and stuff. So I think it's amazing. How are you in particular changing the way that people with disability have accessibility to gaming and to that community?
Well, I left AbleGamers in October of 24. I turned it over to new leadership. But in that journey, in that 20-year journey, I've worked with every major game company that's out there. I've helped craft the standards that game companies use to create accessible experiences. I worked with Microsoft to create the Microsoft Adaptive Controller. I worked with PlayStation to create PlayStation's accessible controller as well. I, fortunately, was really at the forefront of that game accessibility movement and had a seat at the table as we were crafting that way forward. And I'm super proud that just about every major game has an accessibility menu that allows someone to adjust the game, and that even though I've stepped away and I've started my new company and I'm on to other things and tackling other spaces, because I feel like I really made an impact with gaming, and it's self-sustaining now. And so
Mm.
game companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars making sure people can play video games who are disabled, and I'm very proud that I was part of making that happen.
But now you're moving on, like you said. So what is the mission now? What is the impact now?
So the mission right now is really looking at, experiences, and there's a big difference between making something accessible and making an experience accessible. And we have standards and things like that, but standards don't oftentimes give someone with a disability true engagement.
Mm.
And so AccessForge really is my new company, AccessForge, along with Cheryl Mitchell. We've created a company which is looking at how to make cultural institutions, travel, hospitality, truly inclusive to those with disabilities. Because, and I hope we get into it more, people with disabilities are consumers, and people with disabilities have money to spend, and they spend that money in a way where if a company recognizes them as individuals, they will gravitate towards companies that see them as consumers and work to create experiences that truly include them.
Right. If you're a company and you're making it difficult for certain people to access, you're losing that whole customer base, which in the long run could be a lot of money and impact. But like you said,
Well,
on the other hand, if you make it easy for them, they're going to keep coming back to that spot in particular if everything else is difficult. So I think it's important, especially nowadays. It's not just about the physical accessibility, but also we live in a conscious consumerism market right now where a lot of these newer generations are focused more on the story and morality of the people running the companies and what the companies stand for than the pricing or the physicalness of it.
yeah, we do, and the truth of the matter is 20% of the population here in the United States has some sort of disability. You
Wow.
look at the number of, so 1 in 5 people have a disability. Of that, 80% of the people with disabilities you can't see. They're invisible disabilities. And so think about that. 20% of the people, we have watched companies make drastic changes to capture 2 and 3% of a market. Yet 20% of the market is a person with disabilities. I think an interesting statistic that really kind of shocks people is that in the United States, people with disabilities have more discretionary income. That's the money you spend after you paid all your bills than the entire African American and Hispanic population combined.
Wow.
Think about that. You're looking at, and then that doesn't even include older adults, because a lot of times as we age, we start acquiring disabilities. And even if we don't call them a disability, we call it a product of aging. Our eyesight goes, our hearing goes, things like that. You start looking at the buying power of that group's sitting on $15 trillion in discretionary income. They're going to spend it on goods and services that value them as customers. And that means creating accessible experiences so that they can spend money enjoying the rest of, enjoying the life that they want. There's an ROI to accessibility. You just need to understand it and then share with the community that you've put in the efforts to include them. And I think that's where a lot of companies misfire, is they put in the work but then don't share that they put in the work.
Hmm. Right. They're not making it very known. And to clarify for everyone, the money is just a byproduct, and the real goal is just making the experience accessible for everyone. That's first and foremost. But I think those stats really highlight just some mind-blowing statistics, really. And then what I want to get into, a lot of people listening are probably like, what are these accessibilities and disabilities? Is it just wheelchair ramps? Is it just braille? What are we even talking about?
Well, we're talking about making sure people with disabilities can access the world around them in a similar way that you without a disability does. And so you're right, there's Braille. Braille is because I cannot see the written word, so I have to feel the written word. A wheelchair ramp is important for a lot of people with strollers, things like that. But it's about experiencing the world around you. Thinking about, what does an airport, how is navigating an airport if you can't see? Like, how do we create a space that allows that? How do we create, you know, mobile apps, things like that that allow me to bank? If I'm a person with a disability and you don't want me going into the bank, then you need to make your banking app accessible for me as well. So, how to have the experiences that everyone else can have, and how do we translate those experiences for people with disabilities? And you've listed off Braille is a thing, and ramps and things like that. Those are tools, but it also is creativity and thinking about and storytelling. What does a museum look like for a person with disabilities? How do you convey a painting, the Mona Lisa, to a blind person so that they have a reason to go to the Louvre and experience the Mona Lisa? That's kind of work that we do.
Right. And again, a lot of people are saying, well, that sounds like a lot of work for a small percentage. But when you look at that percentage, as you mentioned earlier, it's much greater than we actually think. Just talking about 20%, 1 in 5 people. I mean, and I can name multiple people in my circle with disabilities, especially because I work with the elderly, I work with veterans. But in general, so I think people often just say, that's too much work. But you're saying that the ROI is worth it. It's actually one of the most underutilized markets there is.
The ROI is worth it, but I say to those that are saying that's too much work, here's the stone cold truth. The disability is an equal opportunity club to join. It doesn't care what color you are, it doesn't care how much money's in your bank, it doesn't
Mm,
care if you're male or female, it doesn't care about anything. All of us on this planet are one bad day away from joining this club. This club is really
mm,
easy to join and really hard to get out. So I say to those that say, "Well, that's a lot to spend for such a small person. You'll thank me when I did it already and you need it because someone ran a
mm.
red light. Someone didn't stop at a stoplight. You slipped and fell down some stairs like I did. All of a sudden, you're going to be really grateful that me and people like me have been putting in that work when you need it. Or you just get lucky and you grow into a disability because you got old."
Right. Now, this isn't just about the hospitality space, the airports, and events, but also one thing that you and I talked about beforehand, which I think is so important, because this is actually where we'll see the highest concentration of people with disabilities, in my opinion, are the faith-based events. Because a lot of people with disabilities are looking for spiritual healing and physical healing. So I know you mentioned beforehand to me kind of working in that space now. Is there th anything different about it, or that's kind of just your big focus right now?
So the what AccessForge launched because we thought it was really important. It was really based on my CEO, Cheryl Mitchell, and some of the stories she had. She had become a caregiver to her mother, and her mother had become disabled. And she watched her mother, who was a real woman of faith, see that faith slip away from her.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so she lost her mother, and we were sitting around when we launched the company, and we really decided we were going to tackle accessibility in faith based communities. People with disabilities are one of the largest sources of people who are currently not participating in faith. And so AccessForge created a framework for faith-based communities to really move their communities into including people with disabilities. Um, it is guided lessons that can be, that can have you start move the needle in your faith-based community in the next week, so that you can start including more people with disabilities so that they can connect with faith. Because my philosophy really is this: I want everyone to be able to have the experiences they want in life. And if faith is an important part of life to someone, or having faith is an experience they want to have, then I want them to be able to fully have the same level of experience that people without a disability have. And so we launched our framework. You can find it at accessible.faith. We kept the URL super simple. And it guides, you know, communities of faith on how to make their worship more inviting to individuals of all types with disabilities.
So essentially, this framework will walk us through analyzing our organization and structure to find the failure points first and foremost of where maybe we're not accessible, and then what we can do to make it as such, correct?
Correct. We already know most of them aren't accessible. What it's going to do is guide you through short-term things you can do right now so that you can move that needle, followed by more long-term systemic
Mm,
things that may take a larger budget or more time to create a more accessible faith experience, as well as the whys and the hows, because even in faith, there's an ROI. And if you
right.
truly do believe that everyone is welcome, then you need to create a faith experience where everyone can fully participate.
100%. Like we said, it's one of the groups that has a lot of disabilities, and it's a group that is actively looking for that stuff. And I think that, for anyone to be turned away from the faith because they couldn't access it, like you said, this is supposed to be an experience open to everyone. And this should be the most accessible experience above anything else. So I think that's really important that you've stepped into that space. And then I believe we also have a special code for our listeners to get a discount on that service, correct?
Yeah, it's get started is the discount code. If you go to accessible.faith and use get started, that is going to give you $150 off of the unlocking the complete package.
Right. And then this being your new path right now, where do you see kind of the future going in terms of, are you going to continue to work in the accessibility space, or do you see yourself maybe going off and doing something different soon? What is the future kind of looking like for you?
I'm not really sure. I really want to see where this takes me. I'm excited about where we're going and what we're doing. And I'm really hopeful that this moves the needle for people in their faith communities to welcome more people with disabilities. And I really want to explore this hospitality side of it. I love to travel. I want to travel more. I am a person with disabilities, so I'm going to look at making sure that I I gravitate towards goods and services that um, see me as a consumer, see me as a customer, um, see me as a customer that is worth creating experiences for.
Right. And you mentioned earlier on, it sounds like chronic pain. You deal a lot with back pain and stuff, of course, from your injury. A lot of people with disabilities are in a lot of physical pain, and that physical pain becomes an emotional, mental, spiritual drain. What would be your message to them, just in terms of keep moving forward and everything? I mean, what has really helped you, and how are you being able to do that?
Pain, pain is real. I want to say the truth is pain is real, but the vast majority of pain is in your brain.
Hmm.
And so pain is manageable. And if you have chronic pain like I do, you forget the pain when you're hanging out with friends and when you're laughing or you're engrossed in something. You forget it for a little bit, just for a little bit. And that shows you that pain is manageable. And so, I hurt less when I'm really engrossed in a video game that I love. And I'm focused on what I'm working on. And so, pain is real, but pain is manageable if you focus on other things. And hopefully that focus is on having really cool experiences.
Right. And just speaking of that and the video game space, if you're someone listening right now who has a disability, maybe you don't leave the house much or it's difficult for you to do so, but you haven't gone into the video game space, whether that's because of projected thoughts of what the community is like, or because of bad Reddit stereotypes, or maybe you just think there's not something interesting for you. I have to say, there are so many video games nowadays. I
So
mean,
many.
so many. And a lot of people, we think of the big ones like Fortnite, Call of Duty, all these shooting games. But as I mentioned earlier, there are so many non-shooting ones. There are so many puzzle games that are relaxing and working your brain as well, which is important. There are a lot of multiplayer games now that you can have that are puzzle games. There are co-op games you can play with people online that require both of you to work together to solve the puzzles and different stuff like that. I've been able to experience a couple different games. I'm actually excited because they're remastering my favorite Godzilla PlayStation 2 game is now coming out for the new console. So super excited for that. But whatever your niche is, whatever your topic is, there is something out there. So I highly encourage you to try it because it works your brain, it gets you
Yep.
socialized, and you can always swap it out with something different. So I think everyone, if you haven't tried it and you're stuck home or it's difficult for you to leave the home, this is a great opportunity to make those social connections and get out there. And do you have any recommendations for us in terms of games, at least that maybe you like?
So interestingly enough, I play a lot of single player games. I actually play games not to socialize. I play games to micromanage and things like that. But I want to really just reiterate what you said. There's so many games out there that offer a little. If you just want to like dip your toes into the social aspects of gaming, there's
Yeah.
games out there. Or if you're looking for new BFFs, there are games out there. There's ready to go out. Or you can play by yourself like I do. It's still great for my mental health and my focus out there. But yeah, I'm a firm believer of games as medicine.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the cool things too is we're seeing VR become more accessible. And so the future possibilities that those will bring for experiences is amazing for sure. We're going to have your website link in the description below for people to check out. Again, whatever your business type is, I think you should definitely check this out and just see, because I think a lot of us as business owners have not really thought about every possible disability. And we think, like we mentioned earlier, well, how many people actually had that disability? But when you look at the
So many.
numbers behind it, it's not just about the numbers, but it's about loyalty, as you mentioned, because loyalty in one customer can be more than customers who come and go and never return. And you've got a consistent consumer spending a significant amount of money on return. So I think we should all take a look at that website. So we'll have the link in the description below for people to check out. Just it's always good to reanalyze our businesses and our organizations and events and just look for any failure points, because there's a lot of things we overlook or that we didn't think of. So I think this was a great, refreshing conversation, something very different than what we normally do. So thank you for your time today and for highlighting this issue for us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.